Hi everybody, welcome again to another program of Yeshiva class, Yeshiva classroom. And even before we begin, or even before we begin, we want to give out some information, important subjects that all Jews and everybody for that matter, to give over to them the importance and basically the beauty of our Bible, also known as a Torah, right? The 5 books of Moses. They're all synonymous. They all mean the same thing. The book of the Bible was the books of the Bible. They're really divided into 5 books. You know, I'm speaking to a one-room classroom where some people may be knowledgeable more than others in the basics. But basically, we have to bear in mind that the Torah was given to the Jewish people. It was given to the Jewish people. We have to bear that in mind, because that's what the Bible tells us, right? And the Bible, the 5 books of Moses, was dictated to Moses before his death, right? That's in Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 24. God dictated all the words of the Bible, the 5 books of Moses, to the Jewish people, right? And remember that the book, the 5 books, the Torah, is basically a schematic, historical account of the most righteous people who lived. And in that historical account, which by the way, after chapter 12 in Genesis, only hones in on the Jewish people, as they being God's surrogate, so to speak. So the Bible is a schematic, historical summary, high points of the most righteous people and their relationship with God. And, of course, during those historical accounts and events, God gives over His teachings, thoughts, and theories. Gives over His teaching, thoughts, and theories. Now, the first sentence after God created the world, after that sentence, there's a second sentence which says, "The Ruach Elokim Merachevas al Pnei Hamayim." The Spirit of God hovered over the face of the waters, hovered like a helicopter. He wouldn't get his feet wet. No, it pertains to the fact that God was looking for a surrogate to represent His thoughts and ideas. And they were carried out after the Jewish people were picked. They took the job, and that's how we got to be chosen. We were chosen, and God accepted our commitment from our progenitor, Abraham. And Abraham was promised the land of Canaan, which is today Israel. By the way, this is being recorded, pre-recorded, on April the 7th, 2 days before the elections in Israel, right? On Sunday, is it April the... It's on a Sunday, 9th, April the 7th. Okay, so here we go. Now, God is telling Abraham, I'm going to give you the land of Israel, the land of Canaan. And he was only a small group. He was only a small group. His family, his wife, and the peoples he had made. What does it mean, people he has made? Look in Genesis. You have to get a pen. You have to get a pen and a piece of paper and you look these up for homework. Because that's my whole philosophy is you have to do work. Not listening to the teacher, but you have to partake and follow up. That's a whole subject in itself. We hope to get into it on adult education. Okay, so what happened was that Abraham and his small party, people that he had made in chapter 12 in Genesis, the people that he had convinced to believe in the one God, they were promised the land of Canaan, of Israel. And God keeps His promise. Because we see today, all the world could have beaten little Israel after World War II. They were disunified and without leadership and what have you. And God saw it that the Jewish people should come back at this time. The Jewish people should come back at this time. And today, thank God, we are seeing the fulfillment of that promise by the country of Israel being inhabited by over 7 million Jewish people. And we see now those believers that continue to believe that the God of the Jews is the God of the world, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, one God. And that's what he was charged with, Abraham, to spread the teaching that there is one God in the universe, creator of heaven and earth. And here he is coming. You look at, write this down, Genesis 26:5. And here he's coming to the land of Canaan, which is inhabited by so many king states, so many people, and yet he has been promised the land of Canaan. He has been promised this land with only himself and a few followers. And we see how God keeps His promise. We see that God is the God of the Jewish people, of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So, what was his charge was to better himself by keeping the commandments, by keeping the Torah. And 26:5 says, Abraham figured out and observed the commandments. He observed the commandments, and one of the commandments was from God to leave this country of Mesopotamia, or Kasdim, and go to another city, Haran, and then make his journey to Israel, and then God told him to go to Egypt, and then God told him to go to the Philistine area, and he went and he did, and he, if we study the life of Abraham, carried out the performances that were required of him, of treating people with kindliness, emulating God's thoughts and actions. And he was the progenitor of the Jewish people, and he was the one who began the teachings of the Jewish people and their journeys. And these historical accounts were incorporated in the Bible when it was dictated to Moses in Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 24. All these historical events were captured and put into this book that God thought was so important for the Jewish people to follow. So, I said we have to realize that things that happen to us, especially talking about the Jewish people, although the rest of the world, the Gentiles, have been given a smattering, so as not to look as though only the Jewish people are the chosen people and no one else counts, but they are to look up to the Jewish people as chosen by God, because they should be holy like God, or try to be perfect, right? In 7:6, and in Exodus, and in 14:2 in Deuteronomy. It says, you shall be holy because your Lord, your God is holy, and He has chosen you as a treasured people from all the peoples on the face of the earth. He has chosen you as a chosen people to bring over the uniqueness that there is a God. And if you look in Exodus, write it down. Come on, you have to do some work. Not it's me that's doing all the talking, and that's the failure of adult education. It's the me's that's doing all the talking, and the others, the students, aren't doing any work. We're going to get into adult education, hopefully. So where are we? So look at Exodus 9, chapter 9, Exodus chapter 9, verse 16. And it says over there that Moses is appealing, to Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, Pharaoh, to let my people go, and that they should serve their God throughout the world. Look at it. It's not only for the individuals that are coming out of slavery, but it's for the entire world, that they should be a light into the nation, as the Jewish prophet Isaiah writes in his book of Isaiah. So that is what he wanted to do. He wanted to bring the Jewish people that they should serve God. And does God need any service? Serving God means that one should strive for perfection or holiness during his lifetime. And that's how you serve God. By doing the commandments and living as a committed Jew. And this has an effect on people that surround you, and with people you come in contact with. So that's the charge that the Jewish people were given. And thank God that we still have a remnant of those people who believe that there is a God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and we were destined to live according to His commandments, and He will fulfill His end of the bargain that we see today. So laid out in front of our eyes, and we remember all of those things. We recount all of those things, and this being the spirit or the season of Passover, right? Passover, and we recount all of those miracles that happened to us, and gee, there's so much to talk about. Maybe we can go a little bit into Passover. You know, you have to buy an Haggadah. To a lot of people that, you know, they're coming over to eat and to drink, and someone says a speech for a couple seconds, and everybody's eating and socializing. That's not what the Haggadah is all about. It encompasses all the directives that a Jew is to follow during this period of Passover. All in book form, with meetings. So if you're going to go to a Seder and you're just going to go socialize and drink and eat, and not even being aware that there is so many commandments, that we are to follow. So you have to get an art scroll. I always get an art scroll. I mean, I guess there are other Haggadahs, but it's a Seder. Seder meaning it's the order of events that we follow during the course of that evening. And eating doesn't come to much later. There's question and answers about everything that transpired during that period. And there's always questions that are brought up so that it makes it interesting. You know, the Haggadah talks about the 10 plagues that the Egyptians were plagued with, and that was important. And those are interesting subjects to speak about. And you know, it's nice to bring a good thought to the Seder table, right? And when you speak about the plagues, you know, one of the plagues was the plague of Keenum, which are lice, louse plural, and Keenum were afflicted the Egyptian people to such an extent that they were going out of their minds. And what exactly is Keenum? Keenum is a miraculous creature that has the ability in that little body of his to secrete a cement-like structure, right? And he secretes that onto the hair follicle of a human, and then he has a proboscis that God created him with, and with that he can cut this host's skin, and then he exudes another chemical, an anticoagulant, into the scalp, so that he can suck out the bloodsuckers. And if you have hundreds of these on your body, can you imagine the torment that you're going through trying to shake them off and to scratch the itch that is accompanying it? It's horrific. And that's what they were afflicted with. So you might bring that up, that a tiny creature doing so much damage to the enemies of the Jewish people. And we see also another plague was Orov. A mixture of wild animals attacked the Gentiles, but not the Jewish people. And how did that happen? Because, well, first of all, the Jewish people were segregated at that time, like we know the laws of segregation. And they were segregated at that time. So the animals only attacked the Gentiles. And how did that come about? Probably because the chain of command was broken. The chain of command of eating was broken. In other words, if the wild, ferocious animals like the carnivorous animals of the lions and tigers and what have you, did not have a food supply such as smaller animals, and they're being meat-eating, carnivorous, they had no recourse but to attack man and to eat man, and his flesh, being their food supply, was broken. So listen, some may appreciate that more than others, but try to, jot it down a little bit so that when you have a Seder and you talk about the part that deals with the 10 plagues that God sent upon the Egyptians, we can delve a little bit more into the plague of Keenum or lice and the plague of Orov, a mixture of wild animals. But the Haggadah will explain some other reasons and some very interesting facts that you can talk about at the Seder table, at the table with all the family, so you can discuss all these interesting facts. Now look, I want to show you this card, which is a explanation of where you can catch a 3-minute Torah lesson, approximately 3 minutes in length. Yeshiva class YouTube. Copy this down. Yeshiva class YouTube 3-minute Torah lessons. Yeshiva class YouTube 3-minute Torah lessons and video. Hit video when it comes up. So you can get, there must be about 20 or 30 different types of 3-minute Torah lessons. So again, I don't know where to start, but it's basically important that we have to learn. And unfortunately, leaders, quote unquote, rabbinical leaders of the Orthodox, I'm talking about Orthodox synagogues, are not seeing that the congregants are working and accomplishing, not to listen to speakers, constantly listening to speakers and adult education and pictures of beautiful rabbis who have all kind of degrees and they're being paid honorariums to speak. It's not the point. What should be done, and I've spoken to this on several occasions, is that the synagogue, for instance, should be open like on Sunday mornings, like from 9 till 2, right? And during that time, people are invited to come in and to use the facilities to sit and to learn, whether it is a book of their choice, right? Or, more importantly, if you don't have a book that that is Torah oriented, we would like to present 4 books that should be on the table, right? The English Chumash, the Bible, the 5 books of Moses, right? Should be copies of that. 2, the books on ideology by Rabbi Millers, Rejoice, O Youth, and Behold the People. And the 4th book should be an Art Scrolls paperback edition of Talmud. Now, a person comes to the desk, he has his own sefer book that he's learning with him, by himself, with someone, let him have a seat. If he doesn't have a book, and the mashgiach, or the one in charge of the room, suggests one of the 4 that I just announced to you. The coming portion of this week's Torah reading, books on ideology by Rabbi Millers, and a paperback book of the Talmud. And try to spend as much time as you can. If you get tired of one, switch over to another. Come back to the desk and get another. And that's how it should be done. The Beis HaMedrash program. And not the droning of speakers. You're not going to get as much, nearly as much, as if you were able to learn on your own or with a chavrusa, with a partner. In the Talmud, you could do it with a partner, or your partner could be Art Scrolls with all that's written in the footnotes and the translation into English. You could be a Talmud Chacham. You could, little by little, you could advance. You say, well, what does this have to do with today's world? About whether all kind of theoretical questions could happen to a piece of meat, whether it's kosher or not. I mean, it's a lot of theories. And basically we want to say that the study of Talmud is a time-consuming study of meticulous ideas and particulars which motivate the mind and change the character of a person. And change the character of a person. Right? Learning of Talmud is a time-consuming study of meticulous details. And they motivate the mind and change the character of a person to a positive character. So those things are important, and that is what the charge of a Jew is in this world. It is to seek God, from whence we cometh. And it's a very difficult challenge, but it's something that everyone has in him, and he doesn't realize what this drive is in him. And so what happens? People from the west go to the east, and people from the north go to the south, and they're continuously searching and never finding the real answer. When the real answer is to seek God and holiness through the commandments that he has given. And there's a whole litany of commandments. And the Bible, write these down. And Deuteronomy chapter 4 verse 1. Deuteronomy chapter 5 verse 1. Deuteronomy chapter 6 18. Deuteronomy chapter 7 11. Deuteronomy chapter 8 verse 2. I afflicted you and tested you to see whether you obey the commandments. Right? I afflicted you and tested you to see whether you obey the commandments. And in 8:16 it says over there that I afflicted and gave you a charge, for it is your benefit at the end. For it is your benefit at the end. And that's what the prophet Bilam did. He said in Numbers chapter 23:9 and chapter 23:10, write them down. Try to memorize some of these psukim, sentences, right? He says, let me die the death of the righteous. Let my end, E-N-D, be like theirs. Again, let me die the death of the righteous. Let my end, E-N-D, be like theirs. And that is what we are being charged with, to strive for holiness, perfection, right? To strive for holiness and perfection, for the soul world, S-O-U-L. You know, God created man from the dust of the earth, the body, and in Genesis chapter 2 verse 7, God breathed into the nostrils of man, and that's the soul. Man is comprised of a body and soul. And how unfortunate we observant Jews don't realize the significance of basic ideology. And that's why You can get all of these things, these thoughts from Rabbi Miller, right? Rabbi Victor Miller, who studied in the Slobodka Yeshiva in Kovna, right? Slobodka was a suburb of Kovna, and this teachings came from Western Europe to Slobodka, and from Spain to Western Europe, and from the Mediterranean countries to Spain, and from the destruction of the temples in 70 Common Era, and all of these were transmitted until Rabbi Miller wrote them down, giving you the sources of these basic ideologies of Judaism. And the most basic of anything is that we're here for a purpose, to strive to attain holiness, perfection. No one is 100% perfect, but you know, the modern Orthodox, they have so much on their plate. They want to do defense and offense, and in a limited time with limited energies and strength. Impossible. Only the very few. But the rank and file can go away and be a traveling through a wrong path led by the evil inclination. You see, it's a balance between the good and evil, tugging you in both ways. And if the balance is broken, if there's an imbalance, then you're going to go one way and not the other, and there won't be a purpose in life. Let me explain. What was I going to say? It's 33 in Exodus 33:20. It says over there that God, no one can see God and live. No one can see God and live. Write it down. These are all from the 5 books of Moses. These were dictated to Moses and the 5 books of the Torah, the written Bible. Right? So no one can see God and live. He doesn't have the trappings or catchings to come up with seeing the closeness to God. And even though Moses was there on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights alone with God, and he wanted to see his essence, and it didn't happen. He continuously wanted to note Numbers chapter 33, 4, 5, and 6, and God put him in the cleft of the mountain, and the Spirit rolled by, and the words Hashem Kel Rachum V'Chanun Erech Apayim Rav Chesed Nosei Chesed Alofi Nosei Ovam V'Feshel V'Chator. That's what it said. Those are the 13 attributes of kindliness that God has shown Moses. But he was never. Why can't a man see God? And this is going to be a knock on those others religious ideologies, because if man saw the essence of God, the whole balance between good and bad would be broken. It would be an imbalance. There would be no test. And this is a testing world. This is a testing world, right? What do you mean testing? See, wherever we're at, to see. Even though God helps us all along to reach the goals that we may not know that we're striving for. Take Joseph. I mean, he was sent out on an errand. I have to remember this other God rest of Benucha Yomar. If I forget, I got it. Okay, so anyway, so Joseph We're talking about the events in his life. Look, he went out to visit his brethren, to see what their welfare, and to pass by Shechem, where the brothers had wiped out the sister Dinah for devastating her. And he came to the brothers, and he was kidnapped and sent on a caravan as a slave, and he wound up as a slave in Egypt. And then he said, "Oh, where am I now?" And then they recognized his abilities. He became a servant to one of the head men. And then he was accused falsely, put in jail, and it's all in the Bible. It's all in the Bible. It's very prose, very easy reading. Put in jail, and then he recognized his ability, the baker and the wine server, and he interpreted their dreams correctly, and then the wine butler was before God, before Pharaoh, and Pharaoh had a dream, and the wine merchant said, "I know." The wine servant said, "I know someone who can interpret the dreams," and they brought Joseph. They dressed him up, and he said, and they told Joseph the dream, and Joseph interpreted it for them, and Pharaoh was calm, because he thought this settled the action that he was continuously stricken with, and he felt calm. And he said, "You will be a ruler, you will be in charge." But he never forgot his people. He never forgot his charge. And that was to bring the Jewish people to Torah. And they were saved out of slavery. But Joseph kept on believing that these events are not in his life were meaningful. And that's how we have to believe. We don't know why we're in such situations, but we don't have the full picture. You know, I'm from Wilmington, Delaware. I mean, we didn't have any really meaningful Jewish education. Very few people went to after day school Talmud Torah. Talmud Torah, did they learn Talmud or Torah? No, nobody learned Talmud or Torah. It was just a place to vent out your feelings of ornery-ness from like 4 to 6 p.m. every 2 times a week. So, I mean, did I have any idea that I'd be wind up in New York, and I to go into yeshiva at an older age, and then even giving over words of Torah? I mean, I don't know how it happened, but you know, it's fulfilling, and it's something that we all have. We all have, in one way or the other, to fulfill the commandments and to fulfill the Torah, because if not, we will be cursed for not doing so, because we took that charge upon ourselves to live according to the dictates of the Torah. And it's not that we should get stuck on step 1, where we go to the synagogue and then we pray, and then we go and have a kiddush on Shabbos, and then we go home to sleep. That's not fulfilling the mitzvahs. It's a part being you do mechanically these important directives of praying to God, that you realize that there is a God and everything comes from Him. But we have to strive for more. And everyone out there, if he belongs to an observant Orthodox, they call it Orthodox now, synagogue, and he has to speak to the leaders and say, this adult education business isn't going right. If you want to give a sermon, put it down on a paper and let the people read it. Otherwise, have some meaningful programs, based on Hamedrash, where the people do the work. And you say, well, yeah, okay, that's a good idea. But you have to do it. You have to implement it. You have to cause waves. I mean, 32 and 35, there was a plague. Because those that stood by and didn't participate in fighting against the erection of a golden calf. The 3,000 were killed, tried and executed. But there was a plague sent out on the rest because they didn't take action and do the right thing. Oh, I'm in Florida here for. Hello. Okay. Look here. In the 5 towns. I wanted to say Venuchas Yomar. It said, and so the Jews got out of Egypt, and we went in the desert, and for 40 years we were in the desert. And I believe there were 42 stops, 42 times when the encampment traveled. When the pillar of cloud was over the Mishkan, where God dwelt, when that moved, the entire encampment of 12 tribes and the Mishkan moved with it. And there were, I believe, 42 stops. Like we came off the boat from the Lower East Side to Williamsburg, to Brownsville, to East New York, to Auburn, to Far Rockaway, to 5 towns. All the stops. Those are stops also, but they weren't so constructive because we kept on being driven out. So every stop, it says Venucha Yomar, when we bring back the Torah to the ark, to the Aron, just like the Mishkan and the tabernacle stopped. When it rested, he said, let Hashem return to the myriads of thousands, arise and dwell in our midst. Arise and dwell in our midst. Every time it stopped. Every time the cloud stopped. And that's what we do when we finish reading the Torah on the Shabbos, Venuchas Yomar. And when the ark rested, he said, let the myriad of thousands return to the Jewish people, arise and rest on our midst, rest on the Mishkan's midst. And God said in 28 in Exodus 28:5, make for me a dwelling so that I may dwell in your midst. Mishkan, make for me a dwelling that I may dwell in your midst. 29:46, the same thing. Make for me a dwelling, make for me a Mishkan. And that's what the Jews did in the 40 years that they traveled. They had a Mishkan. It was in the center of the encampment. And then when they crossed over the Jordan, went to Gilgal, and then it went to Shiloh, and then it went to Nov, Gibeon, Nov and Gibeon, and back to Gilgal. And then David, then it was captured, right? It was captured, and the ark was finally transported, and from Urain, and because of a mishap in Oved Evid, where one person was killed for mistakenly grabbing the ark, and it rested there 3 months, and then after that it was brought to Jerusalem in a tent, and it was to house there until Solomon, David's son, was instructed to build the first temple. And the first temple lasted 410 years. It was destroyed 70 years. There was nothing there until after 7 years the second temple was built, right? The second temple was built under Ezra and Nehemiah, right? Read those books of the Bible. The 24 written books of the Bible. Yeah. So where are we? I don't know where we are. But this, I'm spending a couple of weeks in sunny Florida. And, here we have this Jewish paper here. The Jewish paper that we have. This is the editor. And he writes, no community without unity. And he has a ponytail, no yarmulke, and his main theme is unity. Let the denominations unify together as one people. And he doesn't realize that there are no denominations in Judaism, right? There are no denominations in Judaism. All those people who want to call themselves denominations are basically demagogues, because they appeal to the rank and file, the ignorant rank and file, and say, this is the 21st century. This is the 21st century. We have to do things differently. They didn't have electric light bulbs in the desert. They didn't have automobiles. We have to act differently. We have to build a big temple, and we have to not to come to services or to pray, God forbid. But we have to be different. We have to give excuses. We don't have to give excuses for our actions, because we are in the 21st century, and we have our rabbis who got degrees in ignorance, and with those degrees they make their congregants ignoramuses. But Judaism bases its laws on precedents. What their forefathers learned, what they taught, and rulings that they gave, and we see the applicability of it in today's teachings and problems that arise that we must address. But it's all based on precedences, not demagoguery, like Judge Kavanaugh, who was appointed to the Supreme Court. He bases his law on the predecessors of similar rulings, of precedences, and he applies that to the law. Right? That's the hearing that Judge Kavanaugh. So all you people out there that say, oh boy, my rabbi said it's okay. Well, if he's not a learned rabbi, then you got to leave that place and go into the Orthodox. But I don't feel comfortable. Well, here's his opinion. He has this rabbi, Reform rabbi. He's proud of all the great things he does and how he breaks the law, but he feels good about it, whatever. So it's a dying entity, just like the Reform in Germany. The whole country practically went for reform, right? They said, everything, but we don't need the old-time ways. Yeah, this is Germany. We're an advanced country. We want to be like the Germans. We like to be like the Germans, but we were given a charge we have to uphold. And they say, look, it says many places in the Torah, chapter in Leviticus, write it down, 26, verse 1 to 14, right? 26, chapter 26 in Leviticus. 1 to 4. You have to study it. You'll have peace and prosperity if you live according to the laws of the Torah. And then chapter 15, it says, but if not, then you will have horrific happenings to you. And 28:61 says, There will be such horrific happenings that that have never been written about in the book. 2861. Write it down. Oh, we don't understand God's ways. Oh, yeah, we don't understand how God acts. How God let these people die. We don't understand it. Too deep, too difficult for us. And that all these psukim, look at chapter 28. Chapter 28 in Deuteronomy. First 14 sentences, do the commandments, you'll have peace, happiness, and a striving for perfection. But if not, there's 98 curses. Growing in severity if you transgress. I mean, right in front of our noses. I mean, Hitler had nothing more to do than to round up trains full of people from all over Europe to bring them to the gas chambers. Yeah, but I mean, he could have gotten a lot of mileage out of Jewish scientists. All he had to do was be nice, and he could have gotten soldiers, and he gotten people would have fought for the fatherland. No? He had to wipe out, and anybody who dies for the sake of being Jewish automatically gets the next world, and that's what we have to look for, the next world. We plan for our retirement, but I mean, who plans for the eternal retirement? We plan. We got Social Security. We have income invested, and I can live comfortably in this particular confined condominiums. That I can be with my friends and around the pool and have a happy time, and then come back to when it's warmer weather up north, and that's my retirement. But is that our retirement? What happens after 120 years? Does anybody think about that retirement? I have a cousin. She's proud of her daughter and son-in-law who are presidents of the conservative temple in Manhattan. And they don't keep Sabbath, and they don't keep kashrus. I'm proud they're the president. Look, you can feel great if the president or the mayor congratulates you and says, "You did a great job. You built your temple up from nothing to look." And he shook your hand, and even the president came along and said, "Wow, man, hey, you did a great job." The governor, but suppose God Almighty came by and then he said, "You did a great job." How would you feel? And the great job in his eyes is not it is to serve him by keeping the commandments and get a good mark in the next world, so that you will not be destroyed, so that your soul, S-O-U-L, will not be destroyed. Now God makes up the soul at birth. Humans are different than any other thing, any other animal. They're programmed. God has given man a soul, breathed into him, and the breath of life, a soul, and it's made up of a lot of components. You have, an aptitude. An aptitude. I have an aptitude for a musician. Or I can have an aptitude to play chess. I can see 4 or 5 moves in advance. Or I'm a natural athlete. Or I'm a student of what have you. But all of those given in the soul, the Jew has a added component of seeking spirituality, real spirituality. And God helps us. There is the world's population, the Jewish population of the world is 0.01%. 0.01%, right? Take away the percentage point, you have hundreds, right? Of 1/100th of 1%. Yet they have 28% of the Nobel Prizes. 28% of the Nobel Prizes. Yeah. So what does that mean? I mean, yeah. Listen, the Jews are the only smart people? No. They're the only ones with the high IQ? No. But God gave them out of proportion high IQs to put those practices of Judaism into play, and not to solely dedicate wings of hospitals and floors and hospitals and you name it, in the name of so-and-so, in the name of this so-and-so, in the name of Cohen, in the name of Greenberg, again, in the name of all of these Jewish people. And what do they care about bringing humanity to God? To the people, to the world, or to themselves, or to the Jewish people? Nothing. No, a drop in the bucket. A drop in the bucket. And it has to start with right now getting a base of medrash in your synagogue. They say, well, we're all Orthodox. We don't. No, you got to have a base of medrash. You got to have a set time to learn and to work. And to work at it. Look, I have these yeshiva class 3-minute Torah segments, 3-minute Torah lessons on YouTube. This is what you have to type in: Yeshiva class YouTube. All right, Yeshiva class YouTube 3-minute Torah lesson. You got a pen? Write it down. You got 3 minutes of Torah in a lesson. 3 minutes of Torah approximately in a you get a lesson in 3 minutes. I don't know how great it is, but I try, and maybe people will tune in. But it's very difficult. The evil inclination is fighting you to not do these things, because it's a fair balance. This world is a testing world. I tested you and afflicted you to see what is in your heart. That's in Deuteronomy 8, to see whether they kept the mitzvahs or not. Exodus 16:4. And testing, the same word, and Nicaea. Testing to elevate you, to choose, to give you the opportunity to choose virtuously, to elevate your soul, to accumulate marks for the next world. That's what we're looking for, the next world, the eternal retirement place. That's what we have to look for. It's not going to Florida and visiting doctors, whether you can't walk, whether you can't talk, whether you can't whatever. I'll go to this doctor, I'll go to that doctor. That's important to take care of your health. You should definitely go to doctors. Right? It says in Exodus chapter 21. But the main thing is to care for our world, to fix the world, tikkun olam, and that is through a study because of the Torah, because the study brings performance, and that's the name of the game. Now, we have free will. Man has the ability to choose between right and wrong. Right, unlike any other animal. He has that ability, but only to an extent. He has that ability to think in his mind, unlike any other animal, to do good or to do bad. God determines whether that action will come into fruition. God determines whether that act will come into fruition. So it's a partnership, right? It's a partnership between man and God, to see whether he will let that thought come into fruition. Now, just to look around us to realize that there is a God is the first step. Look at the common dandelion that we see growing in our lawns that has produced when ready, a stem with a beautiful yellow flower, and the yellow flower goes, it turns into a mass of seeds, and it hides itself from the lawnmower until it's ready to eject the seeds, and then it sticks its head up, and the wind carries all the seeds into the surrounding area so that it will perpetuate itself. And that's how it is. You know, the leg of an ant. You know, the components of an ant. It's astronomical to figure out the probability of something evolving into the leg of an ant. Or take, for instance, the probability of putting numbers 1 to 15 and to shuffle them and to see how many times you shuffle for that numerical order to arise, number 1 to 15. Over 1 trillion times, over 1 trillion shuffles is needed for the probability of that ant, of that series to come in. So, you know, we were created, you know, with the baloney, with the evolving of a man from a drop of protoplasm, and to realize that we are products of evolution. Ridiculous.